I'm Kathy Lewis. I'm very happy to be with you tonight, particularly happy to honor the three people we honor this evening, and we'll do all that in just a few minutes. First, though, we want to give you a look at some of the educational opportunities that are being presented by the Golan movement around the world, most especially in the Philippines. And so we have a video presentation that we would love to present to you right now that has to do with that work and what's going on all over the world.
Our attention to a community of volunteers numbering.
Thank you, Byron. I think many of you may have come tonight anticipating the words of Bishop Courtney McBath of the Calvary Revival Church. I apologize in advance, I am not he. Bishop McBath, though, was unable to join us, but he did send a letter that I would like to share with you now. He says, "Thank you to the Rumi Forum for the continuous work you do to provide a platform for interfaith dialogue, your philanthropic spirit that recognizes the need to give back, and for your work of unity and education within communities and throughout the world. My friends who are being recognized tonight have made the Hampton Roads community a better place for people of all faiths. Congratulations to all of you. As most of you know, education opens doors within our communities that lead to greater prosperity and increased peace. While I know that education alone won't lead us into a peaceful community, it will, coupled with character and steadfast faith in a peaceful and loving God, lead to peace." A great advocate for peace, Dr. Martin Luther King, said well when he spoke these words, "We will not build a peaceful world following a negative path. It is not enough to say we will not wage war. It is necessary to love peace and sacrifice for it." My prayer is that each of you will carry in our hearts a vision for our places of worship and our communities that place value on education, character, and a steadfast faith, a faith that will lead to peaceful families, peaceful neighborhoods, peaceful communities, and ultimately a peaceful world. I would suggest that Bishop McBath is exactly correct. Communities like this one are uniquely qualified to do very, very important work, to work together to resolve the real issues that face us. It's been my privilege for 16 years to sit in front of a microphone on a public radio station here in Hampton Roads, to conduct conversations with the people of Hampton Roads. And over those 16 years, we've developed, not intentionally, I will tell you, a living civility lab, where each day we try to create a safe space for people to come together to talk about important issues. And I think that safe civic space is probably more important now than it ever has been. I know those of you who have just endured the election campaign would probably agree with that. I am firmly convinced that we have the opportunity. I know, are you just glad to have your car commercials and your Haynes commercials back? Really? I know. Haynes is having a sale. I thought, I know that, and yet it just feels good to, there you go. So I am firmly convinced that we have the opportunity, the ability, and even the obligation to change the world around us, in our homes, in our communities, and even on the public airwaves. And we can start by monitoring ourselves, noticing when we're tempted to jump to conclusions or rely on political parties or jingoistic labels to know people around us. As soon as you start paying attention, you will realize that someone you have put in that restrictive box will surprise you in ways you could not have imagined. That's the truth. So what I experience very often is people will call and say, "I am really frightened." They are concerned for their freedom. Someone will say, "I'm really worried about my freedom." And I always wonder what would happen, and this is what we try to do on our show anyway, is to ask in all sincerity what they're afraid of. To really ask with great sincerity that hard question. Is it a familiar refrain they've heard in the atmosphere, or is there something that genuinely frightens them? And I wonder what would happen if we listened with respect and tried to find areas of agreement on which to base an exchange of ideas. If we learned how to talk with each other and not at each other, how to think through our own thoughts and feelings instead of lining up behind someone because of the party letter behind their name or the exhortation of a media personality, we might actually be able to have real conversations that might lead to real solutions to the big challenges that face us. It seems to me the Rumi Forum is an opportunity to do just that, to engage in honest, real, respectful, appreciative conversation, the kind we have all enjoyed tonight. And it seems to me if we model out there what we experience in here, then the world indeed could be a very, very different place. That we could change our homes, that we could change our workplaces, that we could change our schools and change our world one conversation at a time. Well, tonight we are about celebrating people who are changing the world, and we have 3 honorees who are fantastically marvelous people. You're about to hear more about them. We have 3 people who have the very great privilege of introducing them. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Jim Haw, who will recognize our first honoree. Dr. Haw?
Thank you, Kathy. I'm privileged to introduce George Crawley to you tonight. Not that he needs a particularly strong introduction in this city, because I imagine there's a significant number of people in this room who know him and have known him for a long time. I've known George in various professional roles in this city since 1973, and is a dear friend for the last 10 years. George's life efforts have been focused on expanding opportunities for all people. He's done some amazing things very well with grace, professionalism, and good humor. Tonight I'll highlight a few of these many achievements. Yes, for those of us who were not here at the time, in 1966 the East End section of Norfolk was a slum. The Planning Council and the Norfolk Foundation wanted to redevelop the area. George Crawley was recruited to direct the East Kent project and tasked with assisting the soon-to-be displaced residents in obtaining a variety of public and private services. Norfolk City officials, voluntary agencies, and people throughout the region joined the project's many initiatives. The East Kent project energized residents to seek out better services for themselves and the children attending the nearby schools. Through his work in East Kent, George saw the poor children in the city were not prepared for kindergarten. By focusing on early childhood education, Crawley hoped to liberate children from poverty and instill dignity in poor and working people. STOP was founded in late 1965, and Crawley became its organization's first employee. He served as Associate Executive Director for a few months and then became STOP's Executive Director. Crawley led the 40-plus member board of directors and its growing staff from an initial budget of about $200,000 to over $9 million annually. STOP was an anti-poverty effort. With the Planning Council, STOP secured funding to bring Head Start program to Norfolk. Head Start is a federal program that promotes school readiness of children ages birth to age 5 from low-income families by enhancing their cognitive, social, and emotional development. The first Head Start school in Norfolk was housed in Grace Episcopal Church, where Father Joe Green was a rector. In 1973, George was appointed by Baumhouse to the Norfolk City manager to become the Director of Social Services. He became the first man of color to direct a city agency, and the very first man or woman of color to hold cabinet level positions in city government from Williamsburg to the North Carolina border. This strikes me today as almost unthinkable. Profoundly unthinkable. George was remarkable, but there are many other men and women of color who were qualified but not considered for positions of responsibility in city government. He and many others could wear the uniform of the United States Army, and Lieutenant Crawley did. He could defend his country as others did, but in 1973, he was the first to serve as a department head in city government. He broke through. When I met George Crawley in the late fall of 1974, he was the director of Norfolk Social Services. Mr. Lugar, the state commissioner for Social Services, had just claimed in the summer of '74 that there were no hungry people in Virginia. There aren't any in this room. Maybe Mr. Lugar spent way too much time in places like this. As a member of Old Dominion University faculty, I had ample evidence to the contrary. We presented evidence of income-deficient hunger, which means you don't have any money to buy food. Income-deficient hunger, there is no other kind. To Admiral Rumble, Commandant of the 5th Naval District, and the Admiral ordered all naval enlisted, did not ask, did not say pretty please, ordered to show up at a place and time and make application for food stamps. 39% of the enlisted were qualified, including his command master chief with 9 children. Okay? When we walked in George's office at Norfolk Social Services with some 21,000 applications for food stamps, Social Services had 2 eligibility workers. That was the first time I met George. I remember it well. George tells me he has some recollection of it too. Then as now, George is unflappable. He arranged to get the applications processed, which is really remarkably challenging because the political leaders of the Commonwealth had publicly stated that that summer there were no hungry people in the Commonwealth. George worked collaboratively with Admiral Rumble. The applications were processed, and those who were eligible, some 39% again, of enlisted men and their families got their benefits. For 30 years, George Crawley served the citizens of Norfolk as directors of STOP, Norfolk Social Services, Norfolk Redevelopment Housing Authority, and assistant city manager. George retired from city government in 1996. Is that right? Just checking. Yet he was not done working for change. In retirement, this is an important thing for us to think about. In retirement, which I am and others are, George focuses considerable energies and attention to the plight of young African American men. Too many not succeeding at school, some drop out, while others face ridicule for being good students. George is determined to turn that around. He founded the Hampton Roads Committee of 200 plus men, a regional organization of men from across the African American community who value leadership, integrity, commitment, passion, and service. Members who are bound together by their common purpose to build a better community, to encourage, to inspire, to enable young people and adults to reach their highest potential. The organization's goal is to improve the life conditions of the community and to increase access to opportunities in the community in the areas of education, economic development, and community betterment, which includes quality of life issues. Through their work as mentors and role model, George and his peers and the 200 plus men have shown young men that academic achievements are to be rewarded as much or more as their athletic prowess. At the 200 plus men 15th annual banquet in 2012, a group of 600 African American honor roll students were recognized. George is recognized and receives our thanks this evening for his contributions to our community and our recognition for his leadership in organizing people, building effective relationships, inspiring those around him to pursue the cause of human betterment with purposeful intent. Let's focus on these things, 3 things, ladies and gentlemen. Let's focus on them. George is retired, but he served the city well for 30 years with unflagging attention to its most vulnerable citizens. He responded to the needs of poor children to bring Head Start to Norfolk. He was the first man of color to serve as the director of Norfolk City Agency. He was willing in 1973 to stand out as a black man among whites in city government. And as a civic leader, he stepped up to improve the lives of others. He created a premier organization that transforms the lives of communities. The Hampton Roads Committee of 200 plus men recognized over 7,000 students from 1967, 1997. Just checking. 1997 through 2012, and awarded some $12 million in scholarships. George Crawley is a model to all of us, as a man dedicated to change. If we want to learn more about service and responsibility and care for others, get to know my dear friend George Crawley. We have a good sized group here tonight. I'm glad you're here. I want to ask, in recognition of George, that we consider following his example.
That's Joe Green. I don't know of any human being who has, with such gentleness and thoughtfulness and kindness, woven a life together dedicated to God, to the civil and civic society of which he is a part, and to the larger world and the church. Joe Green is a consummate pastor, leader, friend, reconciler, and a man whose legacy will be undying in this community and in this country. Let me tell you a few things about him that are just some examples, few among many, of the impact of his life. For he has blazed every trail he came across. In 1965, he was the first African American to graduate from the University of the South School of Theology, known as Sewanee. He served congregations in South Carolina and served as chaplain at St. Augustine's College, his beloved alma mater, before called to Grace Episcopal Church in Norfolk, where he served for 30 years. And I have to tell you, where the mark of his personality and ministry is still very rich in a level of hospitality that is unparalleled in any religious community I have ever encountered, including those I have had the privilege of serving. They know how to welcome and how to love, and I attribute that to Father Joe Green's ministry in that place. But he didn't just serve the congregation of Grace Church, he served the entire region. Under his leadership, Grace Church sponsored, as was just said, the first Head Start program in the whole region and worked with other agencies to build more than 200 homes in the Grace Church and Bond Heights neighborhoods. He served at Norfolk School Board before his election to Norfolk City Council, where he served for 20 years that were pivotal in the life and history of this region, and 12 as vice mayor. Under his leadership, Norfolk was literally transformed into the beautiful and wonderful city it is today. His continued work around housing and mass transit continued to mark the city. His work to establish a downtown campus for Tidewater Community College was commemorated when the college named the administration building in his honor. And when you drive by the restored Attucks Theater, once considered the Apollo Theater of the South, you have Joe Green and his passion to thank for the fact that patrons are once again sitting in the seats where others in earlier years heard Duke Ellington, Sarah Vaughan, and one of Joe's favorites, and mine, Nat King Cole. Most recently, the Union of Black Episcopalians, in its national conference, drawn to Norfolk by Father Joe Green, named a scholarship in his honor to give thanks for his contributions to the church and to the community. Joe Green has accomplished much in his life, and I don't know how he did it. I can hardly manage one parish, and he managed a parish for years, ministered, helped run a city, and transform a region. This is a remarkable accomplishment, but an example of what the power of one in a community can do. When you are inspired by love, when you want to reconcile, and when you want to make people's lives better. That is my friend, Father Joe Green, who is one of the great heroes of my life and an inspiration. And when I grow up, I want to be just like him. He is Norfolk's premier bridge builder, and I'm proud to call him my friend. Please join me in honoring the Reverend Joseph Green.
That is gorgeous. Thank you. Take the picture. Okay, thank you. When Wynn told the story about the meeting with Jane Batten and Frank in New York, I wish he had stopped then. But he went on and said some other things, and when I'm grateful to you for that presentation. When James Hall asked me who I wanted to present me, I think I said without hesitation, Wynn Lewis. And you can see he's been a friend. And when you have a friend, they always know what to say about you. They always say good things. It has been a joy to serve in this community and to be honored tonight with my three best friends, George Crawley, Rabbi. It's been a great learning experience with you, and we've lived in this community and helped to serve it. Serving on the Norfolk City Council for 20 years, that's ridiculous. I mean, yeah. But it was a joy to serve this community and to see it grow and develop and to be a part of what I've come to love and enjoy. It's good to see you tonight, and you are my friends. There are not many people here I don't know, I can tell you. And I think those I don't know already know me, but thank God for our paths crossing. Thank you for the Romney Society for this event and all the good people who put it on. I'm learning more about it and hope to serve you in it in the future. God bless you all.
Joe Green and I have listened to some Nat King Cole on a couple of occasions, and that has been a great, great gift. I will tell you that. Our final honoree tonight will be introduced by our good friend, Father James Park.
All I can tell you is that my interfaith relationships have been so enriched by Rabbi Larry Forman. I could spend some time, by the way, reading all the things that he has accomplished and done. I don't think he even knows everything that he did and has done through those years. And it's hard sometimes, I think, to measure the impact. But you know, if I were to come up with a description of Larry Forman, yes, I could talk about his being a rabbi. I could talk about his being a student who constantly is searching and learning, always, always. He's got too many degrees to talk about, all right, in different fields. But in so many ways, it's a curiosity. As a student, he doesn't stop. It's no surprise that he is seeking still to establish a real definitive chair of studies at ODU. But I think the title that captures for me is, I think, certainly one out of his tradition, that of a prophet. I think he is a distinct prophet. And I think that people who knew him in his own tradition certainly knew someone who was able to walk through a lot of things for his people. It's too easy for us, particularly in this country, to forget the impact of the Shoah, the Holocaust, and how one, as a rabbi, brings people to a sense of faith, wondering where God was or where God is. But somehow or other, knowing that God of the covenant, who's constantly about freeing us and discovering new ways, that somehow or other, again, Larry and I are both too young to certainly have experienced any of that. We knew about it and certainly have seen that and have worked with survivors of that. But somehow or other, he again was a prophet that brought people back to God is always with us, and somehow to believe that in new ways. I think he invited people to know the richness, again, of the Hebrew Scriptures and of that experience of God at work. But somehow he never stopped there. He knew the God of the covenant was indeed the God of Abraham, and indeed in touch with everyone. And so over and over again, there's been a constant prophetic message of reaching beyond, calling people to be more than, and to recognize that God just doesn't work with one little group of people, but he's working with all of us to walk in ways of peace and justice. And again, so often, I think the prophet oftentimes steps in ways that he's not always understood, not always appreciated, but somehow the prophet never stops. And Larry never stopped. I've come to know him in a lot of different ways. One year, just a couple years ago, September, October, November, he and I did a Roman Catholic and Jewish weddings together. It's been a phenomenal experience with him. But over and over again, in so many different ways in his ministry. But I think the constantly working at interfaith and encouraging people in that way. I think, Larry, you have made much more impact than you will ever understand for that. That somehow or other, you're not just part of some little Jewish community over here that somehow brought us into again. And I think there's a lot of people walking in your footsteps that you pathed and made out for them. Whether that be Michael Panitz, whether that be Israel Zoberman, whether that be many of them. I think the ground that you laid in this community to somehow to speak of an openness, of interfaith, to suggest, to celebrate our Abrahamic faith together, I think you've been a living example of that. So I'm not going to read all that stuff, okay, one day. But God bless you. Come on up. Look that way. The Kodak moments. Thank you. Larry?
Well, I'm truly honored to be with George, my dear friend and teacher, to be with my dear friend and teacher, Joe Green, to be with each of you tonight, each of you. And I thank you all for coming to this celebration of ethnic and religious diversity. And I thank the Rumi Forum for this Peace and Dialogue Award, and I would pray that by our continuing association with Rumi Forum, that our dialogue will influence and infuse our ethical actions, and we will long continue to celebrate each other so that we might see the future as an opportunity to be transformed and to make our world worthy of redemption. What is the Rumi Forum? Just a couple of words. The Rumi Forum recognizes all of the great religions, East and West, which ask the questions and seek answers to the eternal human dilemmas. Where can we find purpose and meaning to our brief days on earth? How can we live more in touch with what is real? How can we continually renew our quest for freedom, social justice, democracy, and peace in an often torn and struggling world? The inspiring founder and leader of this group is Fethullah Gulen, a builder of science and math schools throughout the world. As you saw in the film, his schools teach and implement those values, ethics, and good works upon which a just, compassionate, and democratic society depend. His schools teach respect and ultimate value for the worth, dignity, and integrity of every human being. Not only intellectual education, but emotional and ethical education for all worldwide is the key to the advancement of civilization itself. We join him in saying that the education of all our children, from birth through the regular school years to graduation from high school and beyond, should be the priority of all our citizenry. After 3 decades as senior rabbi of Old Shalom Temple and as the chairperson for the Gifted and Talented Advisory Council for the Norfolk Public Schools under the aegis of Kathleen Schoonmaker for some 17 years, we perceived a need to create an Institute for Jewish Studies and Interfaith Understanding at Old Dominion University. Now the big task of funding was necessary. My good friend and congregant Charles Cooper, whose family has worked in all aspects of communal endeavors to bring music, art, and culture to Hampton Roads, and who also believed in the interfaith emphasis of the Institute through Jewish ethical values, would bring cohesion and cooperation to our community. He put up substantial funds for this project. I would in a moment like to recognize the Cooper family, represented tonight by Eric and Betsy. I don't know if Betsy made it tonight, but Eric and Betsy Cooper, and thank them for their generosity and courage to fund this significant project. It was a time when I felt like a prophet without honor in his own country, amongst his own people. It was not an easy project to start. And I would also like to acknowledge my good friend and supporter of the Institute, Larry Goldrich, and Jan, the Goldrich family, who are with us this evening. And so, to the Cooper family and the Goldrich family, I recognize you. Thank you. And of course, so many of you were supported and contributed to that great cause. But these were the first. We believe that by presenting information about the world's religions and ethnic diversity in a university setting through open dialogue, we would gain an ever-deepening understanding of one another and perhaps even be able to set aside some of our prejudices and stereotypes. Which brings us to tonight, because during the years I directed and taught at the Institute, I became the only rabbi, I used to say the only rabbi in captivity, who became the faculty advisor to the Turkish Muslim Rumi Forum Better Understanding Club of Old Dominion University. I don't know any other rabbi that has that title, whatever that means. But it was there that I learned of the broader ramifications of the Rumi Forum. I was invited to travel to Turkey to get a first-hand experience of the excellent science and math schools being built in the Middle East and Africa by the Turkish philanthropist, philosopher, and scholar Fethullah Gulen, a man whose students continue to work for open dialogue and understanding between all races, religions, and ethnicities. Our advisor from Rumi Forum who traveled with us to Turkey was a man I came to know and respect as Ali Abi Yurtsever. That means my beloved Ali Yurtsever. He taught us that the theoretical heritage of Islam and the Quran is not dogmatic, but centers around the values of compromise, stability of the family and society, the protection of life, equal honor, value, and dignity for all human beings, justice, equity, dialogue, and consultation. To quote him, democracy and a flexible society, not Sharia law, is the best foundation for human lifestyle, and there is absolutely no justification for extremism or hurt to any group or individual, end quote. Our path to the future must be through all religions sharing and working together, ethically and compassionately, forever higher scientific scholarship and technical development and achievement. Just another word, under the leadership of our dynamic president of the Better Understanding Club, Mustafa Kenan, who also got his PhD in nuclear physics, and who today runs the finest jewelry store in New York. Did I influence him, or did he influence me? I don't know. People say, how come you have a son who's a rabbi, a daughter who's a rabbi, a daughter who's a cantor, and a scientist? And I said, the scientist is probably because of my background, and they say, so why? How come all these kids followed your direction, these footsteps? And I say, my typical answer is, I didn't have a jewelry store to give them. But anyway, that's another story. Now we see Mustafa. He's my son, and he's like my son, just like my son. Well, through Mustafa, we broadened our outreach into the community, visiting a variety of churches and temples in Norfolk and Virginia Beach. In addition to our dialogues and discussions, Mustafa and his lovely wife Yeter and his dedicated ladies cooked and served many tasty dishes of Turkish delights. Our purpose was to enrich our overall understanding of each other, especially of the religion of Islam, as practiced by peace-loving Turkish Muslims and others, as well as to examine the issues and challenges that confront us as individuals and as a world community. And so we are met tonight in dialogue and friendship to reaffirm those values in our own respective faiths and to grow toward a better understanding of one another, and as one loving family come together with the reaffirmation to heal and repair this wonderful world of potential that God has given us. I want to thank you again. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you all for the privilege of receiving this honor. Thank you. God bless you all.
Congratulations to you all. It's now my pleasure to introduce Jenna Ludka with a couple of words of introduction about the Rumi Forum. Jenna? There she is.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Didn't think I'd be back so soon. I was just with you in the month of Ramadan, many of you. It's wonderful to be back here in Norfolk again and to see Larry and Laura, which is a very special gift. Congratulations to all the honorees this evening. I was asked this evening to speak on the topic of peace building and education. In my world, at the Rumi Forum, these two are somewhat synonymous. It is at the very core of what we do at the Rumi Forum and what the greater community, as you saw earlier this evening, of Hizmet, or the service movement, is founded on. At the core, and since its inception, this community and its inspirational guide, Fethullah Gulen, have held that education and dialogue are the fundamental components of peace building. And though it may sound cliche, getting to know one another, or getting to know the other, through discussion and human-to-human interaction, we find we have more in common than not. And what we do not have in common only serves to broaden and enrich our knowledge of the fundamental truth of our pluralistic existence. And believe it or not, It also deepens our own core values and spiritual beliefs. Okay. It's actually right on my mouth. Pardon me. There? Can you hear me now? A little better? Raise my voice. Mr. Gulen, the Rumi Forum's honorary president, is very passionate about education. He says it is through education that a human being contributes in the most constructive manner to his or her family, society, and to humanity. He states, I am convinced that we as God creatures will only achieve our full individual maturity through worldly and spiritual education. He has been promoting this idea his entire life. He just celebrated his 75th birthday. Yes. So the organization that I and my colleagues represent, the Rumi Forum, is an organization that endeavors to play an important role in bringing together people of diverse backgrounds for the benefit of social harmony and cohesion within the community and through education and dialogue. Our mission at the Rumi Forum is to facilitate and contribute towards a more peaceful coexistence among people of different faiths, cultures, ethnicities, and races. We aim to do this through educational and dialogical opportunities for our participants and colleagues through conferences, intercultural exchanges, and speaker series. The Rumi Forum is part of a wider global community called Hizmet, as I mentioned before, the service movement, which has been described as apolitical, philanthropic, and intercivilizational, and whose efforts are most succinctly and aptly described as collective social altruism. Hizmet, or the service movement, is active in more than 130 countries, as you saw earlier this evening, implementing a diverse array of activities dedicated to the service of humanity and existence, and rooted, as I stated earlier, in education and dialogue. About a month ago, my husband and I visited the Avenue of Giants. This is in Northern California. We rented a Ford Mustang convertible, and the Avenue of Giants, as maybe some of you know, is the redwoods. So the gigantic redwood trees. In fact, so gigantic that you can even drive through one of them. So in visiting this area, I was sitting and observing these trees that were towering above me, literally towering, and I noticed a poem actually written for the visitors, and it struck me. And I'll tell you why after I'm done reading it. It's by Joseph B. Strauss. Here, sown by the Creator's hand, in serried ranks the redwoods stand. No other clime is honored so, no other lands their glory know. The greatest of earth's living forms, tall conquerors that laugh at storms. Their challenge still unanswered rings, through 50 centuries of kings. The nations that with them were young, rich empires with their forts far flung, lie buried now, their splendor gone, but these proud monarchs still live on. So shall they live when ends our days, when our crude citadels decay. For brief the years allotted man, but infinite perennials span. This is their temple, vaulted high, and here we pause with reverent eye, with silent tongue and awestruck soul, for here we sense life's proper goal, to be like these, straight, true, and fine, to make our world like theirs a shrine. Sink down, O traveler, on your knees. God stands before you in these trees. So this world is very transient, as we all know. People are born and they are dying every second. And the best gift that we can leave behind, I believe, and I believe many of the great religious and philosophers believe, is to leave the legacy of education. This may be like these trees so straight, true, and fine, and build a legacy of peace and education for the generations to come. And this, I hope, is the message of this evening. Thank you very much.
May we take, before we do our closing remarks, just a moment to recognize Byram Toriev and Jim Haw and all the people who had a lot to do with creating a very lovely evening. Thank you so much. Now it's my great pleasure to present to you my friend Imam Vernon Fareed from the Masjid William Salam for our closing remarks. Imam?
Kathy, can I ask you to come back? Kathy is a person who needs no introduction, and all of us know her. She stepped up to the plate at the last minute when Bishop Courtney Macbeth was not able to attend this evening because of a conflict in schedule, out-of-town engagement. And at the last minute, Kathy was called upon, as she is so many times, working in the community. I have been privileged to be a guest on her program, a radio program, and all of us know that she is a voice in the community. She provides a platform for ideas and knowledge and information to be spread that we would not necessarily get if that program did not exist. So again, I don't have a script, Kathy. I'm just talking from what I know about you. Again, I consider Kathy a friend as well as her husband, friends, and doing a great work in this community. And we just want to present you with this.
Oh, my goodness. I was admiring these earlier. Thank you so much. This is beautiful. I'm excited,
I
because I was admiring that
decided to give
earlier.
you that for the beautiful introduction you gave me.
You're so kind.
And I would echo what Kathy has said in terms of our honorees, outstanding honorees, many again whom I consider friends. Mr. George Crawley, our good friend and Rabbi, Larry Forman, and the Honorable Joseph Green, former city councilman, three giants in our community. Let's give another round of applause for them. And also we thank graciously from our hearts, the bottom of our hearts, Bayram. He's been sitting over there, and I don't know if you didn't know who he was. He is the chair of the local Rumi Forum and the group. With those of you who are part of this committee who put this together, would you please just stand where you are, please? Thank you. Thank you. Thank all of you, and thank all of you for coming this evening. I'm sure you enjoyed the food. I'm sure we all agree that the three recipients of these awards were very deserving persons. We appreciate the work and effort of all of you, because there are many of you I know in the community. You're working in the community, and you are making sacrifices in your own way, and may God bless all of us. So am I supposed to say a prayer in ending this? I got one communication from Jim Haw, told me to say a prayer. So I'm gonna follow your instructions, okay? So if we could join me in prayer. Our Lord, our Creator, gracious God, we thank you for this auspicious occasion this evening. We thank you for bringing various people of various traditions and faiths together to work in the spirit of cooperation, to honor the outstanding work of those who are very deserving, who have served you and served our community so well. We thank you, O God, and we pray that you will bless all of us to return home safely, that our property and our loved ones will be intact. And again, we pray for continued success and continued progress for this community here in Norfolk and throughout Hampton Roads and throughout this nation. And again, oh God, we thank you for those who made the tremendous sacrifice to put such a beautiful program together this evening. And with this, we end in peace and ask for your blessings always. Amen. Amen. Thank you.